And no VC wants to invest more in you than when you tell them that they can't and that you don't need their money.
Hi, I'm Jordy Gold, and welcome to Off the Record Climate Edition. This is the podcast about what's hot in climate tech and everything playing out behind the scenes. Today I'm speaking with Manuela Zoninsein, the CEO of Kadeya. Manuela found out the hard way that venture capital doesn't work when you're building a physical climate tech company. After spending 2 painful years searching for and eventually finding amazing financing options, she's here to share the map she wished someone gave to her when she started out. You're going to want to listen if you want to know why the default venture capital playbook breaks down for climate hardware and why that's not your fault. The 3 unconventional financing tools that changed everything for Kadeya, and how understanding your capital stack actually makes venture capitalists more interested, not less. Let's dive right in. Hi, Manuela. Great to have you on the show. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and Kadeya, the company that you're building.
Great to be here, Jordy. So I'm Manuela Zoninsein, CEO and co-founder of Chicago-based Kadeya. I'm building this business because I think plastics, especially for single-use food products, is really stupid. And that's the mission I'm on, is to eliminate the need for single-use packaging forever for everyone everywhere, starting with the beverage industry, which is a $2 trillion market, affects all of us every single day. What we've realized is the market opportunity is that by designing a decentralized or distributed micro bottling plant, like the one you see behind me, and locating it where the consumer already lives and works and consumes, we can actually unlock a circular model that eliminates waste. It cuts carbon footprint. And more importantly, it reduces costs from the logistics and labor of moving pallets of bottles of water around the planet, as well as the need to then manage the waste on the other side of that. And so by co-locating a circular economy beverage solution with the consumer, we actually cut costs by up to a third. And then the nice benefits of reduced carbon and no plastic.
Gotcha. And maybe you could tell us maybe a little bit the path that you were on, sort of that led you to come to create Kadeya.
So I'm an immigrant from Brazil. My dad was a Marxist economist and my mom was a feminist anthropologist. So I was raised to think in systems, and I was raised to focus on how to make the world better for other people. And so that's kind of my philosophy. And I started my first climate business when I lived in China from 2007 to 2015. I moved there to be a correspondent for Newsweek magazine, was writing about climate change, and very quickly realized writing about climate wasn't going to solve the climate problem. And also realized that I'm really a builder at heart, and I like to solve problems, not just write about them. So I started my first business, sold that to a local Chinese partner, went back to Brazil on a grant from the Brazilian government to start my second business called Insta Agro, still doing really well, and then joined Palantir Technologies, where I was doing international business development. To scratch my green itch, I started a reusable water bottle program at the company, and I helped to run that with a kitchen staff for 3 years. And we reduced single use by 30%. And I learned why reuse is not globally scalable and is not a viable business. So I bring that lens to the reuse market, and I said, let's learn how to make reuse actually commercially competitive against single use, and went to business school, started tinkering, and that's where Kadeya was incepted.
Okay, that's totally unexpected. I had no idea you started a reusable program at Palantir of all places, and that was the perfect bridge. So you've written this article. It's about why you think or how you think venture capital really doesn't work for physical climate tech companies and startups. And you think you've managed to sort of go through a lot of pain and searching for financing, and you really come up with some real solutions that you think can work for other startups in the same kind of space looking to secure funding. Now, can you break down first why you think venture capital doesn't really work for climate tech, and why it is you say that founders shouldn't think that failing to secure this kind of funding, it really isn't their fault?
Absolutely. Venture capital was created for software, and there are some VCs that have figured out how to tweak the traditional model to be a little more suitable for hard tech and hardware, but that is not a big enough capital market to support all the climate innovation that we need as a planet. When I say hard tech or hardware, right, I'm bucketing in there climate tech, water tech, infrastructure tech, anything that is a physical good and which has a component of technology in it. Something that is advancing and on the cutting edge of what we are capable of doing. It can also integrate, of course, AI and software, but it is a physical good that requires a capital investment upfront to produce the product and therefore has some delay in paying back that capital to the owner of the physical good. I'm not including in this bucket things like consumer packaged goods or fashion and retail. I'm not including brick and mortar. And on the other extreme, I'm not including pharmaceuticals that have a whole different payback timeline. So these are products that, depending on the complexity of the product, won't be able to immediately go to market and start generating repeatable revenue. So given that lay of the land, there's three main problems to venture capital funding that I can see. The first is venture capital is created for software. They have a risk and return profile that's very suitable for that market. What they pitch to their limited partners, their own investors, is usually a fund payback of about 7 years. So they need the companies to go out there, generate revenue, get higher multiples or exit to then repay the fund, to then repay the LP. As I mentioned earlier, hard tech, you might need more 5, 7, 9, 11 years. Quick asterisk to say that actually most software companies are not returning funds in 7 years. So that's something that the market is lying to itself about what those traditional funds can actually do. That's another conversation. The second reason why VC is not a great fit for early stage hard tech is that they know how to price risk when you're early in generating revenues and still figuring out how you're going to enter the market. Hard tech needs a handful of years before that happens. So they don't really know how to price that risk. And that links to the fact that most VC founders are not operators and probably are not engineers and have never built a physical good. And so they don't understand the phases that it takes to get to commercialization. They also don't understand that once you deploy your product, the commercial opportunity and the scalability is massive. And they don't know how to kind of price the chunkiness of that model of kind of like it's feast or famine, famine or feast. And then the third piece is that as a founder, because you have to raise more capital to get to a commercial moment and then to that scaling kind of feast moment, you end up getting diluted along the way. And that puts you in a position where VCs don't necessarily want to back you because they don't believe that you're going to be incentivized for the long haul by the possible returns and earnout that you would get at the end of that exit moment. So those are the three main reasons.
So, despite the fact that Kadeya has all kinds of potential, you developed all kinds of interesting customers, you developed revenue, you still have struggled at times to really raise money, the money that you desperately need to scale and build things out. Now, you talk in your piece about how you've gone through this really difficult journey. You want to help people to have them learn from your experience and hopefully avoid some of that pain. Could you maybe share more about the challenges that you faced over the years trying to raise money for the company?
So one of the problems is, as I mentioned, kind of like the chunkiness of hardware. With software, you need some guys and gals who code, and AI maybe is changing the economics there, but you basically just need to pay for overhead. And as long as you got some cash in the bank, I mean, you could even raise like on a monthly basis if you wanted to. Just keep the lights on, keep the servers working, you're putting code out. Now, hardware, you have to actually predict in advance how much money you're going to need to hit a certain milestone. And you have to work backward from the amount of capital you've raised to then understand what can actually be accomplished with that money. Also, your cycles for production to get a new product out to test it in the market, at best is going to be quarterly. Really, what I hear in general is 6 months to a year. And with the tariffs, that's been made even more unpredictable. So the challenge is not has Kadeya or have I been able to raise capital? We've been able to raise capital. We've raised a good amount of capital. If you look at that, we've raised about $9 million from angels and some customers and from some VCs as well. The problem is that money comes in drips and drabs. But what I need is a chunk of cash to plan around that will get me to the next milestone 9 months, 12 months, 15 months down the road. And that's a challenge that some people are lucky enough, fortuitous enough to overcome. I find the people who can overcome that are usually white males who live on the coasts. And that's no shade to those human beings, but the data shows consistently, and you can see research coming out of Harvard Business Review and Stanford University, their gender research shows that no matter your sector, men get funded for their potential and women get funded for what we're already delivering for results. When you're in venture capital, when you're building something that's never existed, that doesn't work. And so maybe it's because I'm not a great fundraiser. Maybe it's because I haven't told the right story. Maybe it's because my pitches haven't been tight enough and the macro situation of the world we live in is changing too rapidly. There's so many extenuating circumstances. But at the end of the day, what the data does show consistently is that women are funded after the fact. And so I've gotten funding in drips and drabs when it's almost too late.
So we're going to get into the solutions. The point of the solutions is to get over what people call the valley of death that you read about in the article. Now, many people have heard of this, but just before we get into everything, could you maybe break down what the valley of death is so people understand what is the problem, and then we could look at the solutions, how to fix it.
So the valley of death is that phase for hard tech companies that they have to survive before they have a product that demonstrates that they can do what they say they're going to do to generate revenue, and before they necessarily have repeatable revenue. And so it's like wandering 40 years in the desert with Moses, that you are scrimping and saving to be able to inch forward and prove that your product can do what it says it's going to do and that it can generate revenue. And Kadeya is almost out of the valley of death. I feel like Alex Honnold climbing Taipei 101, where like I'm almost at the top and like my fingernails are like bending backward and I've got all the bruises and the calluses and it's all chalky. And I'm like pulling myself up by my fingertips right now to get out of the valley of death. And that's the time when you commercialize and you have a repeatable product and a repeatable revenue model.
So you say you found 3 unconventional financing tools that changed everything for you. Now, can you maybe tell us a little bit how you found these tools, and then maybe briefly, very high level, because we're going to get into each one, just very briefly sort of walk us through each of the 3 tools.
Absolutely. And I also do want to very briefly lay out that there's some preemptive tools as well that we have leveraged that I don't highlight so much in the article. So one is angels and micro VCs. These are people who have gotten Kadeya to where we are. Then there's also grants. I've referenced them briefly. Kadeya has won 2 SBIRs with the U.S. Air Force. So setting those aside, we are raising a WeFunder. You can find us on wefunder.com/Kadeya. You don't have to do a crowdfunding on WeFunder, and it doesn't even have to be public crowdfunding. There's things called RUVs or SPVs. AngelList lets you run your own RUV. We've done that before. It basically allows you to become your own micro venture capitalist. You run the process, you price the round, you go out and find micro limited partners, and they get to be investors in you. AngelList, you have to be an accredited investor. With crowdfunding like WeFunder or Republic, and there's other platforms as well, you do not have to be an accredited investor. And it's been an incredible opportunity. The reason we're doing a WeFunder is because Kadeya is something that people want in the world. They want it in their place of work, especially, which is our beachhead market. And We have a $32 million qualified inbound pipeline because people want us in their workplaces. And we've spent $0 and cents on sales and marketing. And we wanted to continue that flywheel and to incentivize more individuals out there to want to tell their friends and family and colleagues about what we're doing so that our pipeline gets bigger. And we want to reward them for that. But also because at the end of the day, water, we believe, is a human right. And we don't think anyone should profit off of selling bottled water. And we don't profit off of selling bottled water. And by doing a crowdfunding, we are empowering individual citizens to own the future of water. So there's also a real ethical, philosophical, kind of humane element to doing a crowdfunding. And then there's a third other interesting bucket. So I've mentioned venture capital, I've mentioned crowdfunding, and then there's a whole universe of debt. And debt is really fascinating because most people don't know what it is. Like they don't like my pickup line these days when I'm at a networking event is like, what do you know about debt? And most people are like deer in a headlight. What are you talking about? And then you'll talk to people who know about debt and they know one silo of debt. And so it's actually very hard to wrap your arms around that elephant, right? You're like kind of like feeling your way over the elephant. Like you can feel the tail and the ear and the tusk. You're feeling your way around this debt thing. And it's actually dozens and dozens of types of vehicles. Debt has existed before agriculture. This is how our world got built. That's how the wall behind you got built, Jordy. That's how the road outside of your house got built. That's how the bridge and tunnel that lets us go to different environments. That's how the airport that you fly into got built. And people in climate are not talking about that. And actually, people in finance are not talking about it. Why? Because they make a lot of money off of higher interest rate or higher cost of capital instruments like venture capital. Now, Climate Drift has done an amazing job. I want to shout this out. If you go to Climate Drift Substack and you search for debt, they've done incredible writing on this. They've done deep dives on the entire world of debt from a high level, taking you through all the types of instruments from super early stage to really late stage. But the late stage stuff makes sense intuitively when you read that because you already have revenue. You already have a product. You've got a pathway to scalability. You can go to your local bank and get debt. People know about that. That article is great to kind of orient you in the universe. And then you've also got some reporting on more equipment financing, which I reference a little bit in my article, but the Substack from Climate Drift covers that. What I've zeroed in on is what's available way at the beginning when you have maybe one product, you have an N of one. You've got a prototype and talks you through, if you're a hard tech company, how to access debt. And I'm only going to shout out one provider because they're providing debt to Kadeya. I don't get money back from them. They're not paying me. This is, it's also the best interest rate I've been able to find. And they really understand early stage hard tech. And they're called Cardinal Robotics. You can go to cardinalrobotic.com. You can find me on LinkedIn and message me. I will introduce you to their CEO, Anand Lalwani. You can also find him on LinkedIn. He's super responsive. And what Cardinal Robotics has done is they've said, wait a second, there's all these hard tech companies who figured out that the first customer is going to be these large corporations that have great credit ratings. And Kadeya only works with Fortune 500 global multinationals. So we fit that bill. And we have a product that can generate repeating revenue with contracts that are paid back monthly. And these are year-long contracts at minimum. And so Cardinal Robotics says, wait a second, you're working with Ecolab, you're working with Georgia Pacific, you're working with Ingredient, you're working with the US Air Force. They have great credit ratings. They're going to issue a purchase order. And that purchase order stipulates that those companies will be paying 12 months of recurring revenue. And we as Cardinal Robotics think that that is really bankable. These are great, reliable companies. They're not going to default. They're good for their word and their contract. And we can back that purchase order. And Kadeya ends up being kind of like the OEM. We're producing the product. we're unlocking this purchase order. Our customer then sends a purchase order and signs a contract with Cardinal. Cardinal gives Kadeya the value of that contract up front minus a few percentage points. We build our product, we get it into the customer's hands, and then the customer pays back the contract to Cardinal Robotics.
Okay.
I guess that's called the shorthand I've found is purchase order financing, but it's not quite because if you go to a bank, they'll do purchase order financing, but they won't come in as early. So it's maybe early stage purchase order financing is the right way
Okay.
to term it.
I think it's a third tool you found as well.
The third tool, I think you guys get into a little bit more with some of the other articles, but that is called supply chain finance. Sometimes it's called factoring. My understanding when I've asked people in the sector why it's now being called supply chain finance is because factoring got a bad rap. Just like crowdfunding got a bad rap, but that's because of bad actors, not because of the instrument. And so supply chain finance is where now Kadeya, which in 6 months will be here, we've got about $1 million of pipeline coming in that we expect will have to be processed in the year, in the rolling 12 months. And with that, I can go to a platform like Clear, and I set up on their platform, and they will finance that upcoming $1 million. Now they're paying us on a per order basis still, just like Cardinal Robotics, but we unlock access to their cost of capital thanks to having enough orders coming in to make it worth their while to set us up on their platform and then to generate the kind of recurring contract that we need to then access their debt instruments.
So, as a former campaigner, I'm particularly interested in hearing more about your crowdfunding campaign. I know some extremely talented people. They've run big crowdfunding campaigns. Some were wildly successful, others looked great and then totally fell apart. Now, from the outside, it looks like the crowdfunding campaign you're running right now seems to be going pretty well. It'd be great to hear how it's going and what steps have you taken to make it as successful as it is.
Yeah, we are really close to exceeding our $500,000 fundraise target. That's what we set out to raise on the WeFunder. So it is going really well. And it's going really well thanks to my colleague, Ali Rose Van Mata, who is a real marketing genius. And she's treated the WeFunder like any campaign where it's time bound. You set a goal, you understand the steps of the funnel, you understand the conversion rates at each step of the funnel. You figure out what at the top of the funnel you can already submit organically through your own audiences, your own email list, your own communities. And then we also figured out by engaging other communities like, Climate Drift, how can we grow that top of funnel? And then based on the conversion rates, can we hit that ultimate targeted dollar value? And that's what we did. It's a lot of work, right? It's really a marathon. That's what I didn't understand before. And we've run an RUV before, as I mentioned on AngelList, which was like a miniature of this. Our goal was to raise 250,000. We raised like 270,000 on there. So we got really good at doing the math and knowing how much human labor and how many posts, what kind of posts we needed to be producing. So that was kind of our practice run. And now we're doing that as well on the WeFunder. But you see me posting on LinkedIn a lot. That's not just because I like clicks for my personal ego. It's because I am generating attention and engagement and awareness. And I'm speaking at conferences and I'm recording podcasts and I'm out there and I'm writing a Substack and we're recording our own podcast and we're publishing on Instagram and TikTok, right? We've mathed out every channel and figured out all the activities we need to generate to then get ultimately to that bottom of the funnel $500,000 raise. I actually think we're going to exceed that. You always hope for some fortunate activities. Like WeFunder, to their credit, really understands how to run a campaign. And so they've rewarded us along the way when we've hit certain milestones. They promote us in their own platform, and that's given us additional bumps. But it's kind of understanding the rules of the game and then optimizing for those rules. That's how we've done it.
Gotcha. And you say you didn't choose crowdfunding because it's easy, but you chose it because it was the right fit for you. I really don't think a lot of people from the outside, I don't think they grasp how difficult it is to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. Could you share about any of the challenges and explain why this was the right approach for you right now?
So while it's a lot of work and time, it is mathable. It is predictable. So in some ways, it's under our control. We could say after X number of months of doing this, we're going to reach the dollar value that we need. Whereas with venture capital, you can't quite math it out. Yes, you can do the funnel conversion rate, but everyone who tells you to run a process and that will lead you to 2 to 3 term sheets, and then you get a competitive process that then allows you to have various choices in front of you to then get the valuation that you want, to minimize dilution, to get the dollar you need. Anyone who's done that is either in software or is a white dude. Like, the math doesn't math in hardware. What I've found is I have to find that needle in a haystack who hates plastic, who understands hardware, who understands beverage supply chain. It's so many variables that we've not been able to control predictably. And so we said, look, we're going to keep pursuing venture capital. It's a long game. VC will be really relevant, especially now that we're commercializing. This is like the turning point for us. We believe we're going to have stations in field. We're going to have recurring revenues. We have predictable margins. We can show how this pipeline converts into cash within 12 months. But in the meantime, crowdfunding is something that we could calculate and predict. And that's why we did it. And the reasons that I mentioned about the story behind Kadeya is so exciting. People want to get rid of plastics from their supply chain. And this is a way where they can invest starting at $100 and be part of the future and be rewarded when their shares increase in value, to tell their uncle, to tell their brother and sister-in-law, to tell their boss, hey, we should get one of these in our workplace. So VC, it's B2B to B relationship. There's an LP behind them that comes to us. Their ROI is our valuation increasing. They tell you they're going to help you, but do they know the customer? They're not going to pick up the phone and call their uncle or aunt and say, hey, I know you have a vending machine in your factory. Would you replace it with this machine? But your retail investor who is passionate about solving this problem will do that. So there's a real marketing flywheel as well that comes from crowdfunding that I don't think people understand or appreciate. Especially for climate, because people want to solve for climate. They want the math to work and they want to be incentivized as well.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
makes lots of sense. So
Yeah.
moving on to the Cardinal robotics piece, you say that it felt like cheating when you came across this early stage hard tech debt. Why did you feel like you came across a shortcut?
Yeah. And this is something that can open a little bit of an uncomfortable can of worms, um, because it comes down to network and access. And I am very privileged in that regard. I went to great universities, have through my education and culture, I can meet someone at a networking event and send the right social signals to open doors. I also have a long enough career and my own successes and financial successes that I can open doors for other people, and people like to trade favors. So I have a lot of privilege in that way. But the introduction to Cardinal Robotics came through one of my early angel investors who now has a hard tech fund. And I pitched him and he basically said, I focus on hard tech that is really a software solution with a hard tech component, but it's not a hard tech first business. So he couldn't invest, but he said, look, I did invest in Cardinal Robotics. And let me introduce you to the CEO. And I connect with the CEO and he's amazing. He's like, 30 under 30, PhD, Stanford roboticist. And I got connected to him because he went to Stanford Business School with my husband. So he was willing to take a call and he was willing to then angel invest a small check. And he was in a position to do that. And then he went on and built a venture farm, which a lot of people can't do. And he then had access to the Stanford community and he was able to access Anand, right? These are all gated access points. And Anand is flying to Davos to speak. So you could have a great product with a huge market. You're the right person to build it. You've proven demand and you can't get the right financing. And before you even commercialize, you run out of cash and you can't raise anymore and you're diluted to zero. So I'm lucky. And that's why I'm so excited to share this with everyone. I told Anand, I'm like, Anand, how do I get you in front of more people? So now I'm working on setting up a webinar just for Midwest hard tech and, climate tech infrastructure innovation to have 50 other founders hear about this. Because I believe debt is going to democratize access to not your average, so your underrepresented hard tech founder. It's also going to democratize access to much more climate innovation, not just your whatever is the hot topic momentarily for VC to jump on for the minute. For a while, it was carbon capture sequestration. That's not popular anymore. They can't get funded. Circular economy had a heyday. Now people don't want to fund it. Or now it's like using SaaS to optimize data center for lower energy use. If you're not in that sweet spot, VC is not going to fund you right now. So debt also moves away from the hype cycles. If you get a customer with a purchase order who's willing to pay recurring revenue for minimum 12 months, you can go get this low cost of capital. And then it changes the calculus. When you're in that valley of death, you don't have to wait till you're at a scalable, repeatable point. You could have a unit of 1, and then a unit of 3, and then 5, and then 10. And all that time you can be generating revenue. You can be deploying units. You can be proving your viability and scalability. And then when you're ready to grow and you've eliminated CapEx as your growth constraint, then go to VC and command a $50 million, $100 million valuation. Your dilution is much lower as a founder. And you can take that $100 million equity round and put it all toward growth. Meanwhile, your debt is covering your working capital and your inventory.
Now, you say that by understanding your capital stack, this actually makes venture capitalists more interested, not less interested. Now, for beginners, people who aren't that familiar with the language, can you just very quickly explain what your capital stack is? And then can you maybe help people understand how you were able to drive a lot more interest amongst venture capitalists by doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, a lot of this financial terminology I'm using, this is my layperson's interpretation. I have an MBA. I know enough to understand what is cost of capital and how to calculate it. The capital stack is understanding what different financial instruments exist and what is their risk appetite and what is their ROI expectation or return on investment expectation, and what product or silo in your company can generate that return. And so when we think about our capital stack, I'm going to oversimplify it, but let's call it 3 tranches. The basic tranche is going to be working capital. That's going to be paying the people who are going to allow us to keep the machines up and running to be able to generate revenue. The next layer in our stack is inventory. And then the third, and this is a category that I'm still getting smart around, and this is where equity makes sense. Equity capital being venture capital and other forms of dilutive capital where someone's going to invest and own a portion of your company is very expensive capital. And that is good for growth, which means I'm hiring people to sell. This is growing how much revenue. That's that top line up and to the right hockey stick. And so I've done this. Like I've been on calls with other hard tech founders and they're like, I don't understand what is your stack or what's cost of capital. And I literally sit there with them on ChatGPT and I say, like, map out these types of financial instruments. What is their cost of capital? How much is it going to cost me? For every dollar that they give me, that they invest or loan me, how much do I have to repay of that? And then map out what is usually the kind of commercial signal that they are looking for that means that I'm viable to unlock that type of capital. So, like factoring supply chain finance, we're really only going to be eligible once we have $1 million on an annual basis of revenue throughput. Later on, equipment financing, that is really only when you've got 5, 10 machines out in market and you can prove that there's a resale value of your product. Also, their cost of capital is higher. I think 13 to 15%. So it's kind of like a menu. You sit down at the restaurant, the waiter comes by and is like, hi, what would you like to order today? Getting smart on your capital stack allows you then to go through and pick out what on that menu is going to give you the most satisfying, healthy meal that's going to give you the energy and the calories that you need to run the distance, to then continue to wake up every morning and run your triathlon or whatever. It's a total set of mixed metaphors there for you.
Gotcha. No, that's helpful. Now, I'm going to read something that you wrote in the article. You say the secret passageway is really a mindset shift. You need a willingness to step outside the default venture script and assemble the capital stack that matches reality, not mythology. It also demands a steep learning curve from founders and CEOs who oftentimes are ambitious and bright, but who over-index on hubris and solipsism. Now, can you maybe break all that down for us and for everyone who's listening?
Yeah, the hubris versus solipsism piece, right? It's a hard personality mix to get right with a founder because on the one hand, you have to be super ambitious. You got to be selling this vision that doesn't exist to everyone who's willing to listen. Like that takes a ton of hubris, a ton of pride. At the same time, you got to be willing to hear feedback when someone calls you on your BS or points out that you made a mistake. I'm sure there's a ton of this. People listening, please write me on LinkedIn or comment on your platform. What did I get wrong? I want to know what I got wrong. And being able to live with like the curiosity and the humility of getting stuff wrong all the time, plus the ambition and the kind of chutzpah to believe that your idea is the one that people should give money to and risk behind. That's what I see more of the hubris and the solipsism, the selfishness, the ego, and not as much on the other half, which is, it's like two sides of the same coin. The ambition helps you get money, get attention, get opportunity. The humility turns those opportunities, turns that capital and attention into faster learning cycles. If you're not learning as quickly as you're promoting and pitching, I believe it's basically a negative margin where you are driving down to zero and then negative. But every opportunity you get that you put yourself out there and you get great, better feedback is an opportunity to be even better, more efficient, smarter, faster than anybody else. That's the exact situation that happened. Like, how did I meet Anand from Cardinal Robotics? It's because I frickin' pitched a friend of my husband's. Most people won't do that. That takes real, like, chutzpah, right? Takes cojones to go and do that and put a personal relationship on the line. And then to go pitch him again and him say no, but then ask for help. And he was able to then redirect me to Anand. And he just said, all he said was like, Anand is really smart. He's building something interesting. He's got some interesting capital that you might want to look into. He didn't lay it to me. He didn't put it on a platter. He didn't say, ask for 4% cost of capital with purchase order finance and go to your customer and negotiate the contract to be a 12-month recurring subscription model.
Yeah.
I was able to figure that out because I went to Anand and I was like, tell me, what am I doing wrong? Here's what I think I should be giving you. What am I missing? So it's getting in front of the right people, having the chutzpah, the gumption, the credibility, the ambition, but then when you're in those conversations, to open yourself up, to be humble, to be vulnerable, to be weak and wrong. So that's that second part of that phrase that you quoted. And then the mindset shift is, if you are ambitious, if you want building a moonshot, world-changing idea, yes, you want venture, but you got to sequence it. I think venture has to come later for hard tech. And you have to be a little bit more, maybe slower moving, a little more nose to the grindstone, and maybe lower valuations while you are raising some venture capital to minimize the dilution and position yourself for when you do get out of the valley of death, be able to start to scale. And so the mindset shift is, I know you're ambitious. I know you can get backed by VC as a human. You are capable. Everyone wants to be backed by VC. That's what the headlines are all about. That's the gold star that you get from your fifth grade teacher right now, that you raise a venture capital round. You'll get there, but we gotta, as hard tech founders, move a little more slowly, a little more diligently, a little more intentionally, a little more quietly to build the product to get to the point where then VC could be viable. The other hand is like, I can get to cash flow positive without VC now.
Gotcha.
And to then the core of your question, why is that, or how has that changed the dynamics of conversations? Is I'm coming to VC. I'm smart about what their cost of capital is worth using for. It articulates or it demonstrates that I understand what their game is, what their return profile needs to be, that I've unlocked lower cost of capital that isn't going to be dilutive for them or for me, that's going to be able to drive the kind of meat and potatoes of the business, and that venture is going to be the gravy on top that is going to be what everyone remembers, what everyone talks about, what makes you feel good and it tastes delicious. But the meat and potatoes, the like core lifting of building these products and getting them out, is thanks to debt. And VCs respect that. They admire that. It shows, I think, a level of sophistication. I'm assuming this. They haven't told this to me. This is how they are behaving toward me now. It also means that I have choices. And no VC wants to invest more in you than when you tell them that they can't and that you don't need their money.
Yep. Yep. Pretty much. Now, we're getting close to the end here. If you were going to go back in time and talk to yourself when you were just starting to look for money, is it as simple as saying, here are these 3 tools, skip all these steps, avoid all this pain, use these 3 tools? Or would you give yourself any other particular advice?
I think I would still say the 3 tools. I think it sounds so simple because what the 3 tools do, kind of to that point of like the mindset shift, is it unlocks a different universe of products and services and revenue models. And so when I say, hey, go look at debt, what that does for a hard tech founder or hardware founder is to say, okay, well, how do I get debt? It shrinks the number of revenue models that are available to me. Oh, let me orient my product and service to match that revenue model. And let me shrink the market that I'm initially going after. Let me focus my go-to-market strategy, my beachhead market, to customers that have good credit ratings, that can pay this monthly fee, that will sign a purchase order. If you're a founder and you're listening to this, or you're an investor, you're like, no, you want bigger. You want a bigger market. You want scale. Yes, but the funny duality of early stages, you actually want to go as small as humanly possible. There has to be a logical thread to scale from that small market, that wedge. But the smaller your market is, the smaller your wedge, the more manageable it is. The more realistic you are, the faster you're going to get your product out, the faster you're going to figure out what revenues make sense and what is your value proposition. And so I actually think that mindset shift in some ways shrinks the universe to make your life easier. It will accelerate for other people their ability to go to market to get a product out there. I actually think you might end up getting venture capital faster ultimately, because you will have had products in field that are revenue generating with debt where you haven't been overly diluted. and you now have a path to scalability. And so that's the mindset shift. It's not just saying debt, okay, go to sleep, you're done for the day. It's okay, debt, what are the follow-on implications? And use that to guide how you go to market and how you build your product and how you design your revenue model and what customers you target.
Gotcha.
And I think that will accelerate everything. I think. So if someone out there is an academic at a business school and has done analysis on this already and can prove me wrong, please put it here and share it with all of us. But so far, this is the only solution that I can rationally articulate will make sense for really vast, rapid scalability of climate solutions.
This seems like a really exciting moment for you. It seems like there's a lot happening. Now, what's coming next for Kadeya?
Yeah, we're going to be out of the valley of death. If you're familiar with technology readiness levels, TRL, I think we're going to be at TRL 8 out of a scale that goes up to 9. And what does that mean? I mean, we're deploying stations starting in 3 weeks here in Chicago in a construction site and in a manufacturing plant. Those are the first machines out of 44 that we're deploying this year. By the end of 2026, we're going to have 44 machines in Chicago delivering zero waste, low carbon, high quality, high margin packaged beverages. And it's going to be real. Like it's like what I've been building towards. So that's what it looks like. And to your point, that idea of like the framework or the mental model that you use, when you understand your capital stack, you understand the implications of that. That means recurring low cost of capital debt instruments that I can start using not for 2 machines, 10 machines, 20 machines at a time, but for hundreds and thousands of machines. It means we can build out a supply chain where there will be minimal interruptions. And if someone calls us up, if Amazon warehouses calls us up and says, we want 1,000 machines, we can be like, great, here's the instrument we're going to need to use. Here's the cost of capital. We'll start getting those to you the next month. And I can say that to customers. We're going to get you a machine next month. Next month. It completely changes the conversation for us. The marketing, the revenue conversion, customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, the data we're generating, the tooling we're going to be able to layer on top of it. Like it unlocks this whole other universe. And so I guess the kind of theme is like, what is the shift in your thinking, what in your mental model, as they like to say in Silicon Valley, that is going to unlock a whole other universe of opportunities. And for me, it really has been debt.
That's amazing. I think this is a perfect place to maybe wrap things up here. I hope a lot of people get to hear this. All kinds of founders, potential founders, hear about what you've learned, hear about these tools. I think it'll be a big unlock for them and be just incredibly helpful. As always, please do go to climatedrift.com. You can find Manuela's article. We'll make sure we share the link for that. Sign up for the newsletter. Please do share the episode with your friends and make sure you do subscribe. But Manuela, thank you so much for coming and sharing all these great, helpful ideas. And yeah, I can't wait to see when you go from the 44 machines to thousands and maybe millions.
Millions. Yeah, we're eliminating the need for single-use beverage containers forever for everyone,
There you go.
everywhere. It's happening in my lifetime, in your lifetime. Get on board. We're doing it. Thank you, Jordy. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Bye for now.